Dave, I want to switch the subject up. Bring us up to date on the Bitcoin ETF filings. We talked about this. Oh, don't laugh. I have you here because that's why you're here. We did this last week. We had the BlackRock and Fidelity's now jumping in. So handicap this one for us. Will this one get the go-ahead? And if so, why? What would take it over the top?
Well, everybody refiled, depending on how you read the paperwork. Most of them refiled on Friday. Some of them claim to have refiled a little bit earlier. All of them are now talking about having a surveillance sharing agreement with Coinbase, the largest, Bitcoin USD dealer in the world, largest Bitcoin exchange in the United States. And I think there's this idea that somehow BlackRock knew something and that the SEC is on the verge of proving this once these surveillance sharing agreements are in place. I'm still fairly negative on this. I think we've reset the clocks here. It actually puts the ARK and 21 shares out ahead if they follow the letter of the filings. But I think what's most likely to happen is we're going to get a response from the SEC that says new filings and SSAs have to look like this. Everybody please refile by X date, and then they'll make a decision. I think it's unlikely that they simply anoint a single winner and say, hey, BlackRock, you get to go out to market a week before everybody else. We all know what that looks like. In this market, being first really, really does matter, especially if first comes under the umbrella of somebody like an iShares BlackRock. So I think the odds are still negative for this year, but certainly things look more positive than they did maybe 3 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago.
I would certainly agree that they're not going to approve BlackRock suddenly and ignore everybody else. That would create a real howl. But I think the real question is, what's different here? Do you think this surveillance agreement, this Coinbase surveillance agreement, really is enough to satisfy their objections about fraud, custody issues, and all of those things? Is that by itself going to do it?
It shouldn't be, based on what they've said before, the words out of their own mouth, not just about Bitcoin, but about other markets where they've established surveillance sharing agreements. There's a level of scrutiny that's involved that I will be surprised if Coinbase can meet the mark on. However, if what's really going on is the SEC is looking for a get-out-of-jail-free card, they know they're going to lose or think they're going to lose the Grayscale lawsuit, they're looking for a way to say something positive about all this. If they're trying to manufacture a way to approve a Bitcoin ETF, this would be the way to do it. It would still be a big shift from what they've said in the past.
You have written, Dave, and implied that Grayscale might actually have a chance at winning. Why would they have a chance at winning? And I would agree, if they have made a calculation, they might lose. This might be a backdoor way to, sort of smooth things over. But why do you think Grayscale has a good chance of winning?
Well, if you actually dig through the case as an impartial observer and you look at the facts being presented to judges, 3 judges in this case, I think it's quite reasonable to say that the SEC has been arbitrary and capricious in how they've applied certain rules. Now, that doesn't mean that they necessarily approve the conversion of GBCT to an ETF, but I think they can still lose that lawsuit that says, hey, you've treated somebody unfairly under the Administrative Procedures Act. So that's a real case for them to lose. It doesn't necessarily mean they flip the switch and all of a sudden it's trading as an ETF. That's a much more complex process.
Yeah, I must say I have a problem with this argument that they approved a Bitcoin futures ETF, therefore they must approve it, a spot Bitcoin. In a futures product, you have a closed ecosphere, essentially. You have positions, you have long and short that can be easily monitored, and you don't have that in the Bitcoin ETF, the spot Bitcoin situation. So there's a difference here, it seems to me. Even if you can make an underlying argument, well, if there's fraud in a spot Bitcoin, they would imply there'd be fraud. Do you get my point here? I'm not sure that it's the same argument.
It's actually sort of backwards. When they originally rejected some of the filings back in 2018, what the SEC said was, historically, when we've approved commodities spot products, there has been both a spot market and a big futures market, and the combination of those two is what gave them solace to approve those products. But then they went ahead and improved the futures product and not the commodities sort of spot product. So they've sort of talked out of both sides of their mouth on this. I think it's unlikely that they're going to win, largely because of details in the case. I agree with you. They're different markets, and it's actually, I think, reasonable to say you can trade futures, but you can't trade spot. We say that about oil, and nobody has any questions about it, right? Because there are mechanics of the oil market that don't let you do this. The mechanics of the Bitcoin market are much more like gold, and therefore it's much easier to do. Storage is trivial compared to oil, but I think it's still likely they're going to lose.